This is the Care Radio podcast with myliferaft.com, supporting you every moment of the day.
Hello and welcome. This is the second edition of the Care Radio podcast. I'm Gary Robinson and once again I'm absolutely delighted to be with you. Here at Care Radio we're all about carers, as you may know by now, and those being cared for right around the UK. We've got our website and social media, which more of that in just a moment. In our podcasts we have lots of amazing stories to share with you, along with some information for the caring community right around the UK and sometimes beyond. In this podcast, we have a showbiz feel with two national treasures.
What I say to every unpaid carer who is listening to this, and I hope you are listening to this, that you have no idea of the joy and the pleasure and the optimism that you give to your patients.
I don't think that my sister or, her family who lived with my mother, I don't think they saw themselves as my mother's carers, but ultimately I suppose that's what they were.
The unmistakable voices of Christopher Biggins and international singing sensation Daniel O'Donnell, who give their personal views on carers and the world of care. We also have the A to Z of emotional resilience and well-being. We're at letter B.
When a baby is born, it comes into this world with absolutely no fears, no phobias, no habits, and no attitudes. All of these are learnt along the way.
More from the lovely Linda Sage shortly. We'll hear from a fantastic charity that has been around for over 40 years, which puts inclusive talent firmly in the spotlight at Chicken Shed.
It is the best place for any young person to go to, regardless of whether they have a disability or not. It makes no difference. It is a complete world where it's inclusion, people respect you, they listen to you, they give young people a voice. It's remarkable.
And finally in this episode, we'll go to Trinity College in Dublin to talk with Dr. Claire Gillen about an exciting new development with an app called Nurika.
We're absolutely delighted that we have participants from over 40 countries around the world in this first month and 1,000 registered users. And we have a really steady state of people signing up, so it really does seem like it's snowballing and taking off, which we're delighted to see.
This is the Care Radio podcast, supported by myliferaft.com, because your quality of life is important.
So to our first guest, Susan Jamson from Chicken Shed. Now, Chicken Shed has been making pioneering, beautiful and inclusive theatre for over 40 years. Chicken Shed is an inclusive theatre company that began in 1974. Primarily based at their own purpose-built venue in North London, they create theatre for all ages and run successful outreach projects, education courses and membership programmes throughout the year. Susan Jamson tells us more.
Chicken Shed is a theatre company, but it's not an ordinary theatre company. In many respects, it is an ordinary theatre company in that we put on shows, we have productions, we do Shakespeare, we do our own stuff. So it is a theatre company. But it's a theatre company with a difference in that to go to Chicken Shed, you don't need to audition, you don't need to have any past experience. The only criteria is that you have to love performing arts. Every week we have 1,000 young people who come through our doors, but we also offer outreach across London, across the country, and even in New York, in China, Eastern Europe, Israel. We do outreach projects. So we reach in excess of 5,000 people every week. So it is a huge enterprise. And the reason why it's different is because we call ourselves inclusive. I actually don't like the word inclusive because I think that implies that there's exclusion, and we don't want there to be exclusion. What we say is that everybody, anybody can come to Chicken Shed and can access our theatre. And because there's no auditions, that makes it quite easy. You've just got to love theatre and you can come. So we have a huge range of people. We have people of every ages, from every background, every ability. You name it, we have it.
Susan, Chicken Shed is quite an unusual name for a theatre company, as inclusive as you are. How did the name Chicken Shed come about?
It's a lovely name. What happened was there were two women that started it. Mary Ward, who was a primary school teacher, but she'd left teaching to have her sons, and Jo Collins, who was a session musician and also ran a wine bar, very entrepreneurial woman. And she'd actually played on Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, which I loved. So, I'm in awe of her, and played with many of the pop groups, and she's written songs for Cliff Richard, you name it. She's a very amazing musician. And they went to a church in Oakwood, which is in North London near Southgate. And they used to talk about one day starting a theatre group for anybody, because they felt it was something that was missing in the community. And they talked every Sunday. They used to talk. In church was a lady called Lady Elizabeth Byng, and she owned a big estate that's in Barnet called Rotham Park, which is where they made the film Gosford Park. And she'd heard them talking, and she said, "You're always talking about this. Why don't you just start it?" And they said, "Well, where can we go?" And she said, "Well, I've got an old chicken shed, if you like, that you can use." And they went, "Okay, we'll have a look." So they went there, and it was perfect. It was a huge space. They did have to clean away feathers. They did have to put like gravelly stuff on the floor, but it was absolutely perfect. And they invited young people aged, I think the children originally were aged something like 13 to 16 to come along. And the kids that went used to say to their parents, "We're going to the chicken shed." And then it became, "We're going to Chicken Shed." And so it was called Chicken Shed. And Mary and Jo always said that when they became posh, they would change the name. But how can you change the name? It's such a good name. So yeah, that's where we got Chicken Shed.
Susan, how did you become involved with Chicken Shed?
Well, I became involved 30 years ago. I've got three daughters. My daughters were 12, 10 and 6 at the time. My youngest daughter's got Down syndrome, and I didn't know anything about Down syndrome before she was born. It was a complete shock. I had no idea. I'd seen people with Down syndrome walking in the shops, and that was roughly all I knew about it. I didn't know what it meant, and it was a huge shock to me. You're expecting to have a normal baby. I'd got 2 girls who were beautiful, and suddenly you're presented with a child that has a disability, and it can be a huge shock. So I must admit, I left her in the hospital, came home, didn't want to know at all. And then after 4 days, I went back to the hospital. I'd been feeding her, so I had to go back every 4 hours. And immediately I brought her home. I had I can't tell you how many people came to the house to tell me about Emma. I had educational psychologists, I had social workers, you name it, I had people coming, which I welcomed, seriously, because I didn't know anything about Down syndrome. I didn't know what I'd got. I'd got this child. And certainly in the hospital, and when I first came home, I was, remember this is 30 years ago, I was told that Emma would never be academic, she would be very loving, she would love music. And I've actually, in all my years, trying to find somebody that doesn't like music, I've never found one. So that, to me, that seemed a ridiculous thing to say. You might like different genres of music, but everybody likes some sort of music. Anyhow, and I was also told that she wouldn't jump and she wouldn't say verbs. And all of this seemed quite strange, but okay, I believed it. And I believed that she probably wouldn't do anything. I had this child that probably would be quite difficult. But very soon after having Emma, she was doing most of the things that my other 2 do, and my other 2 are very different in themselves. So, and Emma's very different as well. And it was very difficult because these people would keep coming and telling me. And in fact, I on one occasion I was sitting in the doctor's surgery, and the doctor went out, and I saw on the notes, like you do, just having a peek, that it said that this mother has not accepted that she has a child with Down syndrome, and that really made me feel quite upset because I knew what Emma had. And then when Emma was 2, I had a phone call, I remember this quite clearly, saying, okay, we have a place for Emma. We'll pick her up at 7:30 in the morning. We'll take her to this place in Chesham, and we'll give her breakfast. We'll entertain her during the day. We'll give her a lunch. We'll give her a tea. We'll send her home by this bus at 4:30. That will give you a break. And I did say at the time, can you take my other 2? because that would be quite nice. And I didn't want to do that. And then I was told as well by an educational psychologist that Emma had a place in the special school, that she could start, I think, like 3. And I didn't want it. I didn't want it because Emma was, Emma was Emma. She was a child. I wanted her to go to, I live in a village. I wanted her to go to school in the village. And I used to work in a play group. So I used to take Emma everywhere with me. I took Emma literally everywhere. I took her to all my 2 children's school things so that people would get to see Emma and see that actually she wasn't that different from any other child. And I had to fight to get her into school. I really did. And at one point, I was being told that they would make Emma a ward of court because I was being cruel to send her to a mainstream school because she wouldn't be able to cope. But you have to cope in the world when you're 19. You have to learn we all have to learn how to cope. So I pushed for her to go to school. And I used to go as well. So I used to read to the kids, I cleaned windows, I helped raise money to build a library. I did everything so that I could keep Emma in school. Anyhow, I explained that to people, that I just wanted her to be like everybody else and have the same opportunities. And I took her to Rainbows, which is like brownies, and I had to stay. I took her to swimming lessons, like my other 2, and I had to go in the pool, and I can't swim. So that wasn't good. I took her to the gym club, and I had to go on all the equipment because people weren't horrible, honestly. It was purely because insurance purposes, and they didn't know, that they didn't know how to treat her. And then somebody told, and I got really fed up with it. I wasn't cross, but I just thought, this is going to be my life forever. And then somebody told me about Chicken Shed, and they said, you ought to go and look at Chicken Shed. They're amazing. And what is that? And they said, well, they're a theatre company, but on stage, there's everybody. You can see you'll see people with Down syndrome, you'll see people not. It's just amazing. And the theatre is brilliant. And I went, okay, but I didn't do anything. Anyhow, this person bought me a ticket and I went to see a show. And if I'm really honest, I went to see other people with Down syndrome and see how mine compared. Is mine as good as these? And I sat in the auditorium, and it was in London, in the Shaw Theatre, and I watched this show. And I can't tell you, it took my breath away. And it was just the best theatre. And I'd been a travel agent, so I'd been selling theatre tickets. So I'd been to a lot of shows in my, I love theatre. But this show was just spectacular. Everything about it, the singing, the music, the production values, it was amazing. And I came out thinking, I forgot to look. I was so in the show, I'd forgotten to look. And yet, up until then, my life, I think every single day, I probably said the words Down syndrome, I don't know, 100 times. I had 2.5 hours of not thinking. It was brilliant. 6 months later, I bought another ticket, this time to see an adult show. And I sat in the auditorium, the lights went down, the music from the band, which is all Chicken Shed, it was like angel music. It was a requiem, and the lights were all flashing, and I literally felt so excited. I thought, I love this. And it was an adult show called The Attraction, and it was, again, the most beautiful theatre I had ever seen, regardless of who was in the cast. I didn't even notice. Everyone performed. It was stunning. It was a stunning show. So when I got home, I immediately wrote to Chicken Shed, and it was from my heart, because I literally just got home from London, and I wrote and said, I wish, you've done so much for me. I've not had anything in 7 years of having Emma that has given me such hope for the future. And I just wondered if there's anything near me that I can do. How can my daughter have this? And immediately, I think about 3 days later, I had a letter from Mary, who started it, saying, what a beautiful letter. I read it to all our people, and we'd love you to come and see how we work. And I live in Wickham, and this was Palmer's Green. I didn't even know where Palmer's Green was. And there was no sat-navs. I had no idea. So my poor daughter had to sit in the back of the car with a map, and we got to Chicken Shed, and I went there and I watched workshops that day, and I've been there ever since. And after 30 years of being there, you can tell by my enthusiasm, it is the best place for any young person to go to, regardless of whether they have a disability or not, it makes no difference. It is a complete world where it's inclusion. People respect you. They listen to you. They give young people a voice. It's remarkable.
That was Susan Jamson of Chicken Shed. Still to come in this edition of the Care Radio podcast, we'll be hearing from Dr. Claire Gillen of Nurika.
But so the idea is if we can catch people early who we think are in an elevated risk category, we can then start intervening or informing people about things they can do to prevent something that still might be 20 years away. So that's really the ultimate goal, is that we'll have an app like this that goes beyond being a science tool and actually turns into a clinical tool at some point.
This is the Care Radio podcast, supported by myliferaft.com, passionate about managing care.
In a recent report in The Independent, a fifth of adults who care for loved ones with dementia have sacrificed their careers as a result, according to a new study. Researchers found a further 31% have been left with no option but to cut down their working hours. On average, they care for their relative 4 days a week, with 34% doing so completely alone. And they're working even harder now, as a third said they've spent more time supporting relatives with the condition since the pandemic began.
This is the Care Radio podcast, supported by myliferaft.com, because your quality of life is important.
Carers Trust has been awarded £1 million to support thousands of exhausted unpaid carers. Carers Trust will use the money to help the thousands of unpaid carers to access much needed respite services and breaks from their round-the-clock caring roles. The £1 million is jointly awarded by Payers Foundation, already a long-term core funder of Carers Trust, and the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport.
This is the Care Radio podcast with myliferaft.com, supporting you every moment of the day.
Elderly spouses caring for each other and parents caring for disabled children are twice as likely to have used a food bank since the first lockdown, recent research has shown. The report, which experts said should quote and unquote shock the nation, found more than 100,000 people doing unpaid caring for older, disabled or seriously ill relatives had been forced to use food banks since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic.
This is the Care Radio podcast, supported by myliferaft.com, because your quality of life is important.
And finally, BBC News reports that a young carer who looks after his two disabled brothers has cycled more than 600 miles to raise money for a charity that's close to the family's heart. Taylor Hardy, aged 12, from Plymouth, completed the distance from Land's End to John O'Groats virtually over the festive period. He raised more than £3,000 for friends and families of special children, which he's supported by. His proud mother, Teresa, said there's nothing he wouldn't do for his siblings. So well done, Taylor, from all the team here at Care Radio. That's your news.
This is the Care Radio podcast, supported by myliferaft.com, because your quality of life is important.
If you'd like to get in touch with us here at Care Radio, you can do that through our website or through our social media. Our website is at careradiouk.com. We're on Facebook at Care Radio UK and on Twitter at care_radio. I'll give those details out a little bit later on. Coming soon, we'll be hearing the second part of the A to Z of emotional resilience and well-being from Linda Sage.
So maybe looking at your beliefs, do they actually help you or do they hinder you? Do they open up a new horizon or do they keep you tied to where you already are and don't let you move forward? So perhaps today, have a look at what your belief system is doing in your life. And if it's not working for you, you can change it. That's the beauty of them being our beliefs. We own them, they don't own us.
Now, it doesn't matter who you are, your background, race, religion, gender or lifestyle preference. We will all be faced with care at some point in our lives. We will care for someone or we will ultimately, hopefully, be cared for. Daniel O'Donnell and Christopher Biggins come from very different sides of the entertainment world, but share one thing, and that is care. I had the pleasure of catching up with both of them recently to get their very individual stories of care. Daniel talks about care in his family and in his home village of Kincastle in Donegal. But first, here's the wonderful Biggins, who shares a very personal story of care about his mother.
Carers are one of the unsung heroes of our times. There are so many unpaid carers who go and do their job and never ever quibble or say no to anything. They are amazing. And I felt this very much when my mother, Pam, who lived in Salisbury, went into a care home, which I was reluctant to do in a way, because, you feel it's the last resort. But, it was so important for her that she was comfortable, that she was looked after. And she certainly was in Salisbury, looked after amazingly. They did the most fantastic job. And it's the commitment, I think, of these people that is so extraordinary. Every day they're positive, they're optimistic, and they help those people through the day to the next day. What I say to every unpaid carer who is listening to this, and I hope you are listening to this, that you have no idea of the joy and the pleasure and the optimism that you give to your patients. Not only to your patients, but also to their families. The job you do is incredible, is selfless. And I say that in as much as that they are not recognized, I don't think, in the way they should be recognized. Because people do this out of the goodness of their heart and knowing that they're helping individuals, families, and so many more people in our society. I think what you do is fantastic. I think it's unprecedented. And you do it selflessly, time and time again. I have so much admiration for all of you.
My mother received great care, first of all, from my sister, who she lived with all through her later years in life, that she lived with my sister. And then in her last days, she spent her last days in Dunlow Hospital, which is our local hospital here. And really the care she got there and the care we received was incredible. They made the period of, I suppose, prior to my mother's passing was just unbelievable. And I just think it was something to experience. I don't think that my sister or, her family who lived with my mother, I don't think they saw themselves as my mother's carers, but ultimately I suppose that's what they were. Now, my brother and his wife, they have two boys, and the second son was born with cerebral palsy, and he now is 40. This care is the ultimate care because this boy needs everything done for him. And they have really dedicated their lives to looking after, Joey is his name, looking after him for all these 40 years. It's hard to describe, I suppose, what you observe from the care and the selflessness of these two people. Even though he's my brother and she's his wife, it's almost like I can stand back and think it's incredible how people can give their lives in this way. It's an important thing for somebody to do, if only once in their life, to care for somebody for a period. It's a gift to give, but it's also a gift to be allowed to give it. Know the importance of what you do or what you have done. Maybe what you do, sometimes you think you're doing nothing, but sometimes it's enough just to be and for people to know that you are there, and that is caring in itself. So never underestimate what you do and the importance it makes in people's lives.
My sincere thanks to Daniel O'Donnell and Christopher Biggins for sharing their stories and thoughts. Coming soon, we'll be hearing from Dr. Claire Gillen from Trinity College Dublin.
This is the Care Radio podcast, supported by myliferaft.com, passionate about managing care.
Linda Sage is a seasoned criminal psychologist, speaker, trainer, author and broadcaster with over 3 decades of hands-on experience. She's got many clients both in the private and public sectors. Her passion and message are clear. Self-care is not a luxury. And now more than ever, avoiding or better preventing compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress and burnout should be primary concerns to us all. Here's Linda with the second part of her A to Z of emotional resilience and well-being.
Before we spoke about the A, the anxiety, and now we're moving on to the B, which is the beliefs. And one of the things I want to just start with beliefs. We actually believe our truth is the truth. One of the things we learn very early on, actually, it's not. Just think about it. If you ask anybody who really believes their football team is the best in the world, they're going to disagree with each other. Otherwise, we would only need one football team in the whole world. That would be a very short football season. But when people have these beliefs, they are developed, they are cultivated, they are textured through our life experience, through our knowledge, and through influences around us. If you think about a baby, when a baby is born, it comes into this world with absolutely no fears, no phobias, no habits, and no attitudes. All of these are learned along the way. So if they're learnt, they can be unlearned and relearned to be more effective and more positive for you. Because a lot of things that we learn early on, we carry like baggage for so long, and they're really not that helpful to us. So our beliefs are fluctuating. They change, they can ebb, they can flow. And that's one of the things that we need to really think about, because we are not our beliefs. Our beliefs belong to us. So I hear a lot of people saying, oh, that's how I am, that's how life is, that's how it's always been done. But they are excuses for letting your personal responsibility go. And when we do that, we're really not in control. Whereas when we take that back and look at our beliefs, is that really helping me? Is that giving me the life that I want, the way I want to live? It's really important that our beliefs are positive and they help us move forward. Whereas if they're holding us back and they're stopping us doing things, especially with the fears and the phobias, they are illogical, and we can challenge them. By changing the belief, then we can change our behaviour and our outcomes. I can see you're a little bit sceptical about this, but let's just take an example. A lot of people say they are afraid of spiders. Yet we live in a country where there are no venomous spiders. If you live in a country where there are venomous spiders, then you have appreciation of the spiders. You know which are dangerous and which are not, and you know what to do about it. But in the UK, we have this uncontrollable fear for a lot of people of spiders, yet they're tiny. In respect, when you see our size and the size of the spider, we are absolutely huge, ginormous monsters to them, and very often people squidge them, which isn't very nice. But the logic is they can't do that danger to us. We are actually a danger to them. But we have this belief ingrained. Perhaps your mother or your father or an older sibling was afraid of spiders, so you learn this innately. But when you become an adult, you can get to a stage where you say, does this actually work for me anymore? Is there really anything to be frightened of? And very often the answer is no. So then changing that then reduces your fear, your anxiety, and makes life a lot easier for you. So maybe looking at your beliefs, do they actually help you or do they hinder you? Do they open up a new horizon or do they keep you tied to where you already are and don't let you move forward? So perhaps today, have a look at what your belief system is doing in your life. And if it's not working for you, you can change it. That's the beauty of them being our beliefs. We own them, they don't own us.
There goes Linda Sage. Thank you, Linda. And we'll be hearing more from her as we work our way through the A to Z in forthcoming podcasts. Thank you as well to our good friends at ELFM for their production support. And as always, you can learn more about Linda at her website, lindasage.com.
This is the Care Radio podcast with myliferaft.com, supporting you every moment of the day.
It's time for our last guest on this, our second podcast. It's Dr. Claire Gillen. Claire heads the team that are developing the Nurika project. Now, the project is developing a free smartphone app that contains games and questionnaires which smartphone users can download, play and complete on their phone. Data from the smartphone is sent to researchers and analysed to identify cognitive markers that are signs of an individual's risk of developing dementia in the future. It is a fascinating story. Claire, tells us more.
So what happens is you'll download the app. It's a free app called Nurika. It's Eureka with an N. And you log in, you give some basic, information about yourself. And then from that point on, you can participate as much or as little as you like. So at a minimum, we like everyone to complete our kind of flagship science challenge, which is called Risk Factors. And it's all about risk factors for dementia. And once you complete that, it takes about an hour, but you can do it in 5 minutes a day for, 2 weeks until it's done. That doesn't matter. Then that unlocks a whole lot of other features in the app, like games that you can play at your leisure, etc. So you can if you just log on and complete that, you'll be helping enormously with the science. But for people who want to be more involved, there's many other science challenges within the app, and you can take part, again, in as much or as little as you like. So different challenges in the app ask you to give information perhaps about your mental health, others about, your physical health, and others, just ask you to play these different cognitive tests. So you can give as much information as you're comfortable giving and be a citizen scientist in your own way in however much information you want to provide us and help us with.
And what age should you start using this? Is this for anybody, any age, any generation? I'm thinking I'm 50 now, and, should I be training my brain a little bit more than perhaps I am doing on a daily basis?
Yeah, so again, the focus of the app is really on the research measures, right? On us learning from your behavior and your performance at these games. So it's very important that we actually get a really broad range of people to participate. So people who are young and dementia is a very long way away, and people who are in a more at-risk bracket later on in life, etc. In terms of the brain training of brain training, it's not a focus of this app, but the kind of cognitive tests that we're using are good candidates for brain training in the future. So we'll actually learn from your behavior whether these things might help people to keep their cognitive performance elevated over time, just by virtue of how much they play these different games. But I want to be cautious and say that the science just isn't there yet, and that's what we're gathering through this app with your help. So we can learn maybe in time that one of these games can be an effective form of brain training.
And in terms of the usability of the app, and I'm thinking of my parents now, who still have the most antiquated mobile phone, or two of them, that you've ever seen. They flip up and, the usual sort of stuff. How can I help them, apart from buying them a smartphone to do this? Is it quite straightforward for people who aren't necessarily tech savvy to teach somebody like my parents how to use it? So could I do it quite easily and show them? Does it work like that?
Yeah, so it's designed to be, for an individual user to be able to interact with it like they would any other app on their phone. So I suppose that's the key variable. I do find, though, that these days these flip phones are getting rarer and rarer. And I know my parents are number one users of the Nurika app, and everyone seems to have a smartphone these days. But no, so I think one of the strengths of this approach is that it really is made to be used by yourself and not to have it be guided. And this is a really important point too, because a lot of the cognitive testing that we do in laboratories has a person sitting there and explaining a task to you. And if we talk about taking these measures into a clinical setting where it might inform a course of treatment that you take, we know doctors don't have the time to be sitting with someone and explaining them how to do a cognitive task or waiting for them to complete it. So if we can have this in a really user-friendly format on your phone, people can, in theory, do these games before they go into a doctor's office, or go out, do them, and go back in, depending on the particular situation. We're really already kind of have our eye on clinical translation, which is so important. So if we find the effects that we hope we will find, that we can perhaps predict someone who's at risk and might benefit from an intervention early, we already know that then this can be used in an economically sound way in healthcare systems.
And you launched in June, and you've had some significant success so far. Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, sorry. And we're absolutely delighted that we have participants from over 40 countries around the world in this first month, and 1,000 registered users. And we have a really steady state of people signing up. So it really does seem like it's snowballing and taking off, which we're delighted to see.
What is the ultimate vision from Nurika? Obviously, it's a very long-term project for you and your team, but what does success look like? So,
so there's lots of different projects that have different timescales and different goals, but ultimately, one of the things we're really trying to achieve is to move away from, an intervention or treatment model towards a preventative one. So we know that if we can intervene earlier, you have the best chance of offsetting someone's or increasing the number of good years that someone has, for example. And we don't, in the case of dementia, really have any effective treatments. But so the idea is if we can catch people early who we think are in an elevated risk category, we can then start intervening or informing people about things they can do to prevent something that still might be 20 years away. So that's really the ultimate goal, is that we'll have an app like this that goes beyond being a science tool and actually turns into a clinical tool at some point, where people can identify their own level of risk using it, and then use that information to modify their lifestyle in ways that they can to reduce their own personal risk.
And if you'd like to become a citizen scientist, you can find out more at neureka.ie. I'm Gary Robinson, and I trust you've enjoyed our second Care Radio podcast. I certainly have. Thank you for your company. And there's more about Care Radio at our website, careradiouk.com. Until next time, bye-bye.